just seeing how scared all the kids were and how scared and upset all the other teachers were, and how our administration was just kind of like, well, you just got to keep going. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But it just, I don't know. It was just one of those things where I like seriously thought about it. And it's like, is this the type of environment I want to be in for the rest of my life? And the answer was no.
Welcome to Uploaded, where I, Angela, chat with VTubers about what they've uploaded. Evie is a VTuber singing teacher who focuses on all genres and experience levels. She teaches at her own studio, Evie's Music Studio, and even founded and annually directs OffKai Expo's community choir called OffKai. Today, we're going to be talking about some heavy topics about Evie's decision to leave her job as a public school music teacher. These topics include gun violence in America and mental health struggles. So this episode may not be for everyone, and that's okay. Let's go say hi. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I am still sick. I did some warm-ups already, but I kind of want to, since I'm in this mood of warm-ups, kind of want to go over some warm-ups with you as well, since you are a singing teacher.
I saw some of them.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is the most, I think, the most iconic one from High School Musical.
The lip trills. All of these videos, everyone loves lip trills is like the one thing I've noticed. I don't know if that's like, they're not a bad warm up. They're good, but it just feels like that's like what everyone focuses on. They sound really goofy. So I don't like, it makes sense.
It sounds goofy, but I do think like trilling lips, kids do them a lot, right? Blowing raspberries, trilling their lips. But as an adult, you don't really do that anymore. So I wonder if it's just
no, it's not very natural.
On social media, it's like a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's like abnormal and gets people's attention. The big thing with lip trills, because I always like when I'm teaching, I always try to explain like why we're doing what we're doing. So it doesn't just sound like I'm having you make like stupid noises just for the hell of it. But the big thing with like lip trills in general is they're going to help your breath control. And you immediately know if they're working or not, which is the other nice thing about them. There's so many things with like if you're like self-taught or if you're, practicing on your own where it might be like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. But with lip trills, if you're not doing it right, you'll know because you're just not going to get the sound. But, that's just a warm up that's really good for, getting your vocal cords moving without putting a ton of pressure on them right away. Right. Kind of the same thing as humming. It also helps with your breath control because if your breath is really inconsistent, then you're not gonna get that trill. Right. So it's a warm up to get you, what I like to call not singing necessarily, but audiating. Right. You're doing something on a pitch. You're starting to warm up your range, but you're not putting that like maximum amount of pressure on it. So it's a really good warm up. It's just very goofy.
Okay. Well, speaking of goofy, so the next thing I do.
Okay, that one I can explain. So with there's not like it's not just a meme, but what that is getting you started for is just general like facial tension, making sure you're getting rid of it, right? Because that's a very exaggerated shape. And in general, when you're singing, especially if it's like more musical theater, especially like contemporary musical theater, you need to be like super emotive, right? Not just in an acting perspective, but in a singing perspective as well. Right. Especially with that style of like those really bright high belts. Right. That really like nasally, like bright shape. Right. You can see that it sounds kind of nasally, but their mouth is really open. And that's like exactly what you need for the belting is to be, in the front of your face or, you might hear it as like singing from the mask of your face. But you also need to make sure that sound has room to resonate. So that way, you don't sound like this when you're belting. Right.
Gotcha. Okay. So that makes a lot more sense. I thought for sure that was the one thing that was going to be like a prank that like they just made these Disney Channel stars do.
Yeah, it's like, and of course they're like playing it up for the bit, right? Like, I don't know if I'd be like that exaggerated when I'm doing it, but there is like a lot of things where, you'll hear people just go like, mame, mimo, moo, stuff like that. And we've done that, you can do that on pitch or off pitch, right? But just to help you kind of start thinking about different vowels and different shapes regarding diction and stuff like that.
Okay. And then I think they did sirens next.
With sirens, it's usually like go up, from your lowest to your highest, go down from your highest to your lowest, right? And that's just meant to kind of like stretch out your range in a way where you're not like thinking about your range, if that makes sense, right? Because a lot of times if, you tell someone sing the highest note that you can, that's a tall order, right? And that might make someone really nervous, right? And that'll create tension, which creates, other problems. If you tell someone to literally go like, woo, then that's, you're very relaxed, you're very casual, you're not worried about accuracy. So you're able to warm up the higher end of your range without putting, stress on yourself, right? Able to keep things kind of almost like stretching things out in a way, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then I think the last thing is just the physical thing, but they shake it out. I like it. Which I feel like, again, aligns with all the tension and releasing you've mentioned already before.
Yeah, just things like getting rid of like body tension. A lot of people like carry tension in places where they don't like think about it, like jaw tension, tension in your back, tension in your shoulders. And those are all things that can negatively impact your voice, right? A lot of the times when people are, struggling, I think, especially when you get to like, this is one of those things where it's very important for beginners, and I think when you leave that beginner stage to that more intermediate stage of, singing, it's really easy to forget about posture. But a lot of times I'll have to like tell my more like intermediate or advanced students, right, the same things I would tell a beginner student regarding posture, because we just it's really easy to slack off about it, right? Just making sure you're straightening your back, keeping your shoulders down and back, stuff like that. Those little things can go a really, really long way in terms of, your breath control and your power, right? Because that all goes back to, how you're breathing, right? If we're hunched over, we're going to have a harder time, taking that initial breath when you start singing. And that's going to be harder to, it's like one of those things where it can easily be a domino effect of like just straightening your back isn't going to solve all your problems, but it's certainly going to help.
Right. So how would you rate this overall warm-up exercise?
Honestly, it's presented in a way that's really goofy, but it's not wrong. Like nothing in it is like incorrect really in my opinion, other than the fact that they might be doing like some of these things where they might be putting too much pressure on them, right? Which again is probably for the sake of acting. Whereas, again, a lot of these exercises are meant to, get started singing without having too much pressure, right? So, but all the techniques are, those are things that can work. The only thing that's really missing, I guess, if you were to call this like a general warm-up, is there's nothing in it that addresses pitch matching, right? There's nothing in it that addresses, like ear training or stuff like that, or more exact, parts of your range. It's a lot of, slides and stuff like that, but there's no actual like scales or arpeggios or things like that. And no real actual singing, right? Lots of audiating. But when you're singing, right, there is where you're going to have more pressure, right? And a lot of times we want to do warm-ups that involve, actual singing before you get into like your repertoire and stuff like that. So I guess I'd give it like 6 out of 10. Let's go 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay.
So yeah.
Nice. Okay. So we've been talking about warm-ups, and you've mentioned about how you've been remote for quite a while. I think you made the switch to become a full-time online music teacher at the end of 2023. So
that's right, because I quit mid-year, which is like big no-no, isn't it? I almost got in a lot of trouble. But yeah, I started full-time January 2024, and it's been 2 years, which is really crazy to think about. Soon it's going to be, I've spent more time like full-time teaching remote than I ever was in the classroom, which is even like weirder to think about.
Oh, yeah. So like, what are some realities versus expectations? Because like you said, you were a music teacher at school, so now you're only remote. You've seen what I look like, but I feel like I rarely turn on my camera still, which is kind of important for singing, as we mentioned about facial faces and whatnot. But like, are there any struggles or? Yeah,
it's one of those things. And I was very advantaged in the sense that, so I graduated college in 2021 and my senior year was 2021. So I did a lot of my student teaching online during the pandemic. So I was already very familiar with, how to deliver lessons online, how to prep for lessons in an online setting. Teaching on Discord wasn't anything, super foreign to me. So I was really kind of lucky in that aspect. With teaching VTubers primarily, and I think a lot of vocal teachers would disagree with me on this, I do not require students to turn on their camera. I turn on my camera when I need to demonstrate something. And if I have students that, do use their camera, like I'll be honest and I'll say like, if you use your camera, it's going to make my job easier, but you don't have to, right? Because the way I see it is if you're weighing having the camera and then someone being super nervous because their camera's on, it's one of those things where it might do more harm than good.
Right.
Right. And especially, I guess it's one of those things where being in the VTuber space, I know that a lot of people, they're VTubers for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. So, and I did already have some experience doing it before I went full time. But something I've noticed that I've gotten really, really good at, and it kind of freaks people out a little bit. And you might have experienced this from time to time. Even if someone doesn't have their camera on, I can kind of know how they're shaping their mouth because I can hear the difference. And that's something that I was able to hear before, but I can hear it a lot more finely now than I was before of someone's exact shape. I can hear, I don't need to see if you're not opening your mouth wide enough. I can hear it, right? I don't need to see if your tongue is too high up. I can hear it. And of course, it's easier to make those observations when I can see people, but also it's something that, it was something I was already able to do because that's just part of being a good, vocal coach is being able to identify those things. But now it's I can identify it without necessarily having to see when I can hear the nuances a little bit better. So it took some time to get used to and kind of find my rhythm, I guess, with teaching online full time. Because the teaching itself wasn't too bad because I had just started VTubing in August of 2020. And I had made a lot of friends through VTubing. And she reached out to me and she's like, hey, I know you're a music teacher. Would you be down to teach me how to sing? And I was like, okay. I taught her for a little bit. And then it was just one of those things of her friends told, or she told her friends. Yeah. And then eventually, I did not want to get a summer job in between semesters. And even if I wanted to, it was still 2020, right? It would have been really hard to get an in-person summer job then. So I put a little thing out on Twitter of just hey, any VTubers want singing lessons? And it blew up a lot more than I thought it would. And so I had a studio of 45, I think 50 people. I learned very quickly of okay, this is how much I can teach per day if I want to not kill my voice. And I'm still learning that lesson sometimes. I was able to kind of figure out what's a good amount for me. And I was also able to build a lot of connections really fast. And the thing that sucks is when I started teaching full time, I assumed I was going to have to quit VTubing stuff just entirely, right? When I started teaching full time in the classroom. But then it turns out, I had no money. We were broke. At the time, my boyfriend, now my fiance, his student loan payments were absolutely insane. Because something changed with Sally Mae. And so I was kind of the sole breadwinner for a little bit. And so I, even though I was teaching 7 a.m., I'd get home at 5 because I worked an hour away. I would then, I went back on Twitter and was hey, who still wants vocal lessons? Yeah, it was bad. And not in the sense my students that were fantastic. And many of them I still teach, to this day, or I still keep in contact with. But it was literally I would wake up 5:30 a.m., leave the house at 6:30 a.m., get to school at 7 a.m., leave school at 3:34-ish, right? Get back at 4:30, sometimes 5:30, depending on traffic, because I had to take the Beltway. And then I would, end up teaching from 7 to 9 online. So it was just, and I did that 5 days a week. And it was brutal. It absolutely destroyed my health. So I guess it's one of those things where even though I feel it's wrong to say I had no struggles with transitioning to full time, but it was so much better than being in schools. It was I already kind of knew how to teach online. I already had an established client base. I already had my Discord set up. I had already been paying taxes. I had, it was just a matter of just kind of expanding, And I guess the problem I have nowadays is making my schedule not insane, in the sense that I'll sometimes start teaching at 8:30 in the morning. And then I don't teach again until 2:30 in the afternoon. And then I'll teach again at 8:30 at night, for some of my corporate clients and stuff like that. And so it's more so now learning how to deal with having a super spread out schedule, which is I think something a lot of freelancers struggle with of sometimes you're going to work weekends, sometimes you're going to work at night, and managing that with like maintaining like, relationships with like my parents, my partner, and just like generally having a social life when like so many of my friends have like the traditional 9 to 5, whereas I'm like sometimes 8:30 to 11:30 and then 2:30 to 4:30 and then 7:30 to 8:30. But it was definitely a very big improvement from, my experience in the public school system, just because, outside of like just the financial aspect, I worked at 2 schools in Baltimore that were not great, to put it lightly.
Can I ask? So, because like, going to freelance is daunting for a lot of people, whether it's because like health insurance gets more expensive. You're basically on your own. And then like you
That's
said.
why I'm getting married.
But like before that, you weren't married yet when you decided to make the leap to become a full-time freelancer. So what was like what was so bad about school education systems, besides the obvious with America, that made you be like, I can't do this anymore?
So part of it is, so I was not teaching vocals in the school system. I was actually teaching elementary band and orchestra. I had always, been a singer, but I've also played violin and bass for a number of years. And before VTubing, I actually was en route to be a high school orchestra director. And VTubing is what made me kind of shift paths to focus more on vocals than strings. But I got my first job in elementary school. And I don't mind doxing myself because I joke about living in Baltimore all the time. But like Baltimore in general, the city and the county, I don't know exactly for the city, but to put it in perspective, Baltimore County has failed their like financial audit for the past 10 years.
Oh.
And that's just like accepted. It was my first year teaching, and it was the year and it was 2021, right? So after spending like 2 years online, this was kids' first time being back in a traditional classroom, except it wasn't a traditional classroom at all. There's masks, we're disinfecting everything, and that's, one thing. But I also was tasked with teaching band with masks.
Oh, wait, so
and
like the woodwinds, the brass?
So we had, I'll see if I can find a picture of it and I'll send it to you. We had, they look so but and I don't even think they worked. I feel like it was like, I don't know, maybe it did. I'm not qualified enough to speak on that. But that was brutal. And there is something that is like specific to Baltimore, and I know other places in Maryland and like the East Coast do this, but Baltimore County specifically did something called exploratory music. And I don't know what your experience was with like band and orchestra in elementary school, but when I was growing up, it was basically you pick an instrument in 4th grade, you do like the pull-out lessons with other people with your instruments once a week for 30 minutes, and then you do the same thing in 5th grade. Right. Was that like your experience if you did band and orchestra?
So, yeah.
What Baltimore County did, and I think this was just, I don't know why they did this, like genuinely. I found like a handbook about it when I was going through, because when I got to the school, it was a mess. Like the teacher, like my classroom there, and this is at one school. I had another school too to deal with. I was doing 2 schools at the same time, which is pretty common for elementary school band directors. But when I got there, the old teacher that was there hadn't like been inside the closet since like 2019. And I was trying to like find an explanation for like why this exists. But what it was is, instead of doing that, in 4th grade, you would have a class with everyone, like a traditional like art class, PE class, your whole class. And you would all play the trumpet and then the violin and then the clarinet.
Wait, who's providing these
3.
Instruments?
The county. And what they would do is there would be 2 guys that would come in with a truck. And this sounds so fucking insane, and it is, but like explaining it makes me feel like a crazy person. But they would have these 2 guys come in and they would have a cart. Right. And in this cart, there would be like 2 doors below it, and the doors would like open up, and it would just be like cubby holes filled with trumpets and clarinets. And then on the top, you would have like all the like repair materials for it, extra, like depending on what it was, maybe extra mouthpieces, extra strings, extra, like the bows were all kept in like one box for the violin one. And they would bring that to you. And it was really stupid. Because like, and I think what it was is in the 70s, right? A lot of kids did not have in Baltimore did not have a lot of exposure to, classical music, to classical instruments, right? So their idea was, let's show them 3 instruments. And we did a percussion unit as well, but that was a lot of like chair drumming, stuff like that. But their idea was to show them an instrument from each family to give them like a better idea. Whereas like nowadays in the 21st century, you know, there are kids I know that get smartphones at 5 years old, which is insane to me. But that's like meta now. Like I feel so stupid saying like meta for parenting, but that's like it's common. Like it's crazy. But that's the thing is you have kids that come in and they know what they want to play. They're like, I don't want to play the trumpet. I want to play the clarinet. And so so there was that. And then there was also the idea of, okay, this is going to sound so insane in a post-COVID world. There were never enough instruments, right? We would have classes of like 20 to 25, sometimes everything. 28 kids. Yeah, they're sharing everything. What it was is we would just like the violins, you would just pass them back and forth between each other. Okay, whatever.
Right.
For the trumpets and the clarinets, what they were instructed to do, this is what was written in the handbook, is they would take the mouthpiece out, everyone had their own mouthpiece.
Okay.
Right. But then you would just take your mouthpiece out and give it to the next person and they'd put their mouthpiece in and start playing it, which is still kind of like...
Kind of gross because there's still the spit valve and everything.
Yeah. Spit on the floor has like always been a thing in band classrooms. Right. So I don't know. But during like when COVID was really bad, we were instructed to put puppy pads on the floor to catch the spit. And I'm like, what? But so I come in thinking, how the am I going to do this, you know, with COVID, right? And we're all on a Zoom call. And I'm just like so overwhelmed because this is, you know, not at all what I thought my first year teaching would be. And someone asked, like, what are we going to do for the curriculum for exploratory music? Because with like the 5th grade, like you would have exploratory in 4th grade. And then 5th grade, you got to actually pick your instrument. And 5th grade was actually really chill but what the rule was is we didn't have to wear masks if we went outside. Right. So in the beginning of the year, you know, we would just like go out to one of the playgrounds and sit on the grass and play instruments. And that was actually really chill and really fun. Kids like that a lot. But this lady raises her hand in Zoom and is like, what is the curriculum then for exploratory music? And the like guy in charge of the music department just goes, there is no curriculum.
Oh, that's not the right answer.
I was just like, damn, okay. And so they're like, we're working on making one, but for now, just go through with percussion and try to like, you know, just show a lot of videos. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
So they told you to be like a substitute teacher vibe, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the thing too, and I think this is something like, you know, you and me growing up, movie day was like a big deal when we were in school, right? That was like, oh, hell yeah. But nowadays, most kids do not give a shit about movie day. Like kids nowadays, and I'm not saying everybody, right? But in general, right? A lot of kids just cannot sit still and watch a movie. Like they just can't do it. And a lot of the stuff they were giving us was just like worksheet video, like what you'd leave for sub plans, you know, except that was meant to be the whole thing. And a lot of teachers, you know, myself included, looked at it and we were like, this is so dumb. Like, this is not going to work. And especially when you think about, you know, how that 4th grade year is meant to, you know, convince students to join the band, you know, then it's like, okay, my recruitment is going to be absolute ass next year.
Right.
Because 4th grade sucks. And I was very grateful that, you know, I found ways to make it fun. I basically looked at it and was like, this is dumb. And I made my own curriculum of like how to teach the different instruments. I had them do a lot of stuff where I need to see if I like still have any of it. But basically what we would do is we would go over like the regular instruments and then I would pull them out and I would play them. Right. And they really liked when I would play them. And then what I would do is I would let them do like requests, right? As if it were like, you know, like a karaoke bar or something. And I'd go over, like I tried to make it like an emphasis on like, okay, we can't go over the instruments. Let's go over note reading. So we would like pull out an instrument, like say like the bass or whatever. And I'd have them like someone hum a tune or like, you know, a melody from like a song. And I would like figure out by ear what the notes were. And then I'd write out the letters and then I'd have them write out the notes on the staff. And so it was a way that they could like still learn about, you know, the instruments, still like get involved with those, but also still learn about like note reading. Cause that just like was not a big part of the curriculum for some reason. Like it was like teach the notes as you need them. I say while doing air quotes with my fingers. Like when you're doing violin, we would teach D, E, and F sharp. But then we would teach trumpet and it would be C, D, and E. And it's like, okay, that's cool and all. But like a lot of kids got confused of like, is this still like a C now that we're on trumpet?
Right.
You know, which like makes sense because, you know, different instruments use different clefs, but it was it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. But we did stuff like that. I remember I tried to integrate like music history into it a lot. So like when we got to like brass and stuff, we did a lot of like lessons on like the history of jazz, like New Orleans jazz bands and stuff like that. So like I found a way to make it work, and I actually had really high 5th grade numbers, which was something I was super proud of, because a lot of teachers, reported a dip in their numbers. And I was one of the few teachers where I could be like, my program quadrupled within a year. I was so proud of myself. Kids were so excited too, because now this meant that they got to play instruments. Right. However, this is one school. Other school that I had, school B, we'll call it, was a different story. It was still the same curriculum and whatnot. However, I get there day one. I don't have a classroom.
Oh.
No classroom. The classroom I was supposed to have was the dance teacher's classroom. And the dance teacher was super nice. She was very apologetic, but the dance teacher was also very quick to tell me, hey, we're and I was like, okay. Like first day, she looks at me. I'm like, hi, I'm Evie. And she's like, hi, Evie, we're and I'm like, okay. I had no classroom. And so these carts, right, a lot of them weighed around like 200 pounds because they were really heavy. They were built in like the 60s, 70s, and they were also carrying at least 10 instruments, right? And what we were explicitly told by, the county, by the music department of the county, is that we were not supposed to push them from place to place. They would bring people to push them, and it was usually a 2-person job. And I brought this up to my principal, and I asked her, like, what am I supposed to do then when it comes time to use the instrument carts? And she said, well, they're carts. You can push them.
Oh, my gosh.
Right? And it's one of those things where it's like 25-year-old Evie would have pushed back on that a lot more. But 21-year-old Evie,
right,
who's first-year teacher, right, she was just like, okay. All right, I'll do that. So I would be pushing these carts around the entire school, going into teachers' classrooms. And that's a great way to get teachers to not like you, is bringing a massive ass cart into their classroom. And I tried really hard to make good relationships with teachers. I had a few teachers that just straight up like pitied me. I had a teacher who felt so bad for me. She brought me Dunkin' Donuts whenever I like came to her class, which was just, it was very nice of her, but it was also like, oh. But I had to deal with that. And what ended up happening is, because I was doing this all the time, I actually developed a pinched nerve in my back.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I probably could have sued. I didn't, because at the time I wanted to stay with my other school, right? Because my thought was like, okay, even though school B is really, school A is not as bad, and I want to keep that relationship there. So it started, I kind of like transitioned to full-time freelance in stages, right? I quit one school and I stayed with the other. So in the morning I would be at the school, then I'd come back home in the afternoon and I would teach online. But yeah, school B was a mess. I had, it gets like really bad. It was an area where we had a lot of like active shooter threats constantly.
Right.
We had a lot of, kids bringing guns to school.
A what?
We had a lot of kids. Yeah, that was like a common thing. We had a lot of parents bringing guns to school.
Oh my God.
We had, I got catcalled at 7:45 in the morning by this guy who's in the fucking parent pickup line and his kids in the seat next to him. I was told I was a fine ass white woman, which, like, looking back at it, like now, that's really funny. But at the time, it was awful. There was stuff like that. And I remember like talking to my admin about it because I felt really gross.
Right.
Like, one, like I'm being catcalled. Two, this guy's doing it in front of his kid, in front of other kids. That's just, you don't do that.
None of it is appropriate.
Yeah. And my admin basically told me, like, well, you're just going to have to get used to that. That's just the way it is, right? Same thing with, like, having the active shooter threats all the time, and I'm part of, I grew up with, like, the active shooter drills, when I was growing up. I remember, like, Sandy Hook and stuff like that, and seeing that on the news when I was in middle school. But it was, like, there was that. There was, a lot of parents that were threatening me just because I would tell their kids that they could not stab other children with pencils. So apparently that's a no-no on my part. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea to say that, God forbid. But yeah, it was really bad. Okay. It was really bad. And then at the end of that year is when Uvalde happened, that shooting. And there were, a bunch of schools that were closing because of like threats and stuff after that, because the people were worried about like copycat shooters. I don't know, maybe, but that really affected me.
Right.
Just seeing how scared all the kids were and scared about how scared and upset all the other teachers were. and how our administration was just kind of like, well, you just got to keep going. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But it just, I don't know. It was just one of those things where I like seriously thought about it. And it's like, is this the type of environment I want to be in for the rest of my life? And the answer was no. You know, I remember having kids ask me, like, what do I do if I get shot? What do I do if you get shot? You know, and that's just, it's such a harrowing conversation to have with a 9-year-old. And it's just not a conversation you should have with a 9-year-old. And it really, really affected me. And I think it affects all teachers. Like, I'm not special. You know, I'm very, very lucky that I got to get out and do what I do now. I just am not built for teaching in a post-COVID world. And that was something that I kind of had to come like
to terms with.
Yeah, because it's like I worked my ass off in college. I got all these like awards. I got all these, you know, like opportunities in college. And like, I was like convinced like this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And doing that and then realizing I can't do this, you know, you feel like a failure, right? This is what I've worked towards. And I couldn't do it. So I did a lot of therapy and I, you know, kind of like slowly got over that. But like, I've told my parents and my fiance of like, if for some reason this doesn't working out, I'm going to go get a traditional job. I'm not going back in the classroom. I can't handle it. And what happened at the end of my second year, like this is what changed everything, I think, is at the end of second year was the first off choir. So for those who don't know, OffKai Expo is a VTuber convention in California. And I did a panel at the first OffKai Expo remotely. It was just like a general singing panel. And one of the things I noticed is how excited people were to sing together, right? Even though it was just like a general singing panel where I would like do like a call and response, like quick demo of something. People just were really excited about that. And I got the idea of like, what if we did a VTuber fan choir, right? Because, you know, especially after COVID, there's not a lot of opportunities as adults to make music together, right? You know, some places have community orchestras, community choirs, but definitely not all. And they're becoming less and less
definitely not
common.
For like anime or for VTuber or like Japanese music is so small, so niche.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that, you know, I live in Baltimore. There's things like the Baltimore like Gamer Symphony Orchestra or like MagFest is close to me and they have their own choir and symphony orchestra. But I was really inspired by that. And I was really inspired by what happened at OffKai Expo. And so I DM two of the gals that founded OffKai Expo, Mari and Rat. And I was like, hey, I have an idea. And they thought it was super cool. And I went to OffKai Expo and we did the choir. I think our first choir was like 16 people. And then last year we were at like 45 people on stage. And I think that changed everything, right? Because it was going from like this place where I'm at school and it's constantly like,
nobody wants
you
to
are
work with
annoying, you are causing. Yeah. And everyone just kind of treats me like, and then I go to off choir. And like that first off choir, there were literally, you know, I was giving my like thing at the end of like, thank you so much. This is something that was like such a labor of love. And people were literally like chanting my name in the audience.
Gosh.
And people, you know, and then that, you know, people were coming up to me, you know, and stuff like that. And it just, how the do I go back to school after that? Right. You know, and that's like, I don't know. Originally, I was so on the fence about it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it one more year and then I'm going to decide. But that last year, I couldn't make it. It was such a show. And I was like, I am going to go where I am wanted and where I am appreciated. And if that means, you know, the anime girls are who loves and appreciates me, then I'm going to work with anime girls. So it's just like, I don't know. It's one of those things where it was definitely a transition in terms of getting used to like freelancer schedule, as in like, I have to hold myself accountable for certain things, especially like commission work and stuff like that. But oh my God, it genuinely saved my life. I don't know what I would do if it weren't for the VTuber community and how kind they have been to me and how like people in the community have been so sweet and so kind to me. And it just like, I genuinely don't know where I'd be without. I don't want to think about where I'd be without it because it's just probably not good. Like, but it's definitely like saved my life in so many ways. I'm happier. I'm healthier. You know, I don't know. It's just the way my boyfriend described it is, or my fiance described it is, when I was at teaching that first year in particular, he basically said that it was as if the light had drained from my eyes and I was a husk of myself, right? Like I was alive, but I wasn't living. And now, you know, he said, he's like, now it feels like you're back in a way.
Aww.
Like I have my fiance back. I love it so much. I'm so grateful. And I don't want to do anything else. Honestly, I love working with you guys. I love working with the community. I love OffKai so much. Seeing how that has grown has been crazy. We're arguably growing too fast because each year we have people hanging off the risers, which is like funny, but also like, but it's just, I don't know. It's crazy. But yeah,
awesome.
Sorry, I kind of trauma dumped a little bit.
No. This is so fascinating to hear.
That's the lore.
I feel like a lot of people in America, like we all know the issues with the school education system in America, but to hear like firsthand about your experience. And like, cause like, you know, there's Abbott Elementary, you know, there's like TV shows about this.
Yes.
But like,
I can't watch it.
I was mad. Yeah.
I deadass can't watch it.
I mean, like Abbott Elementary does bring up issues, but it's still a family show. So they can't really go into the details about, you know, all the mistreatments or like the gun violence or any like, I don't think like people know how far it goes with teaching in America.
Yeah.
So I am very happy that you are in a better spot now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy because I have so many people where like when I tell them like and like that isn't even all of it. Like there's stuff I'm like not including. A lot of people are just like horrified, right? Especially if I talk to like, and I think my thing too is like my experience was very unique. Like there have been other music teachers I talked to that are like, what the and I don't want it to seem like I'm like saying like all schools in America suck ass. And even not all schools or administrators in Baltimore. But I think I was just dealt a really hand. Like I feel like it was just kind of doomed from the start. And it sucks because, and I think what it is too is like when you're a young teacher in particular, everyone wants to change the world. Right. Everyone leaves college and they think they're going to be like Miss Honey or whatever. They think they're going to be that hallmark, you know, teacher. And it's just not the reality of it. The system is so messed up that one person, not even 5 or 10 people can fix it. You know, it's just, and trying to fix it is just an impossible task.
Right.
And so for anyone that like, you know, my friends that are still teachers, like they are so brave.
You say you want to make a difference as a teacher, and I think you are making a difference as a teacher because of the fact there's like such a big difference between teaching kids and teaching adults. Whereas teaching kids, they don't know. Like I did grow up learning music theory, but I didn't know what music theory was until like I became an adult and be like, oh, this is helpful for singing, for like overall basic knowledge. I want to know it now as an adult, like formally. Versus as a kid, you're kind of just like, I don't know. Yeah, my piano teacher told me to play these notes in a scale, and I don't really care what that scale means. So there's just like, now that you're teaching adults, I feel like there's such a hunger for better knowledge in music. Especially since, you know, we're not just doing classical music, we're doing, you know, Japanese music has different scales. You know, I ask you all a ton about Broadway songs and, you know, who knows how many 7th and 9th chords there are in those pieces.
Jazz, baby.
But I just think that, like, you know, there's so much power with teaching adults music. They have that thirst for knowledge and hunger. And like, there's, you know, I'm sure like 5-10 years ago, there weren't anime singing teachers. So it's just so cool that we now have this option to do that.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I definitely had to like make some changes in how I like deliver content. Like it was kind of like a shift to get used to that, you know, but I've heard so many stories like from my students of how like, you know, maybe they used to sing as kids or they always like wanted to take singing lessons when they were younger, but like their parents couldn't afford it or they didn't feel confident enough. And it always like is so heartwarming to me to hear people just the general idea of I always wanted to do this and I never thought I could, but now I am.
Right.
You know, and I think that's just so powerful. And it like that's part of why I do what I do is it fills my heart with so much joy to see people happy about the progress they make. Like when someone's like really satisfied with like something they just did, or they get really excited of like, I did it that time. You know, it's like, that's what drives me. So I think there's like a healing aspect in it for some people. And that's part of also why I wanted to, do off choirs. So many people told me with that is they're like, this is my first time since middle school or high school that I've got to sing with other people. And, singing with other people on stage it's one of those things where you don't really know until you experience it, but it can like, some people describe it almost like a religious experience,
right?
Like just coming together and creating music with people, creating art with people is something that can be so impactful.
Speaking of OffKai, have you, because it's usually in July, I want to say, have you already started prepping for this year's OffKai?
So usually we start prepping in January and the convention's in like middle to end of June. But this year, because of the World Cup, it's the end of July. So we had an extra month. So we kind of changed how we prep this year. Usually we figure out all the songs first and then start arranging. Like we figure out where they're all going to go first. Whereas this year, since we had extra time, we started arranging without knowing our full set list, which is kind of a risk. But we figured, we have this extra time, more music's going to come out, and obviously we can't do stuff that's like super, super recent by the time we get to OffKai Expo because, it takes time to arrange the music. It takes time for the guide singers to make the guides for people. And then it takes obviously time for people to learn the music, right? But we've been doing things a little bit differently this year. But we started prep in January and we actually already have we have a lot of stuff already arranged and like almost ready to go. The thing is like, it sounds like a lot of time, but it's like first 2 off choirs, full stop, they were a mess. Like looking back on it. So I'm still at school doing all this. So like those times where I only had to teach for like an hour and a half, I would literally just sit there and work on off choir stuff. But I was the only person like arranging the score. I was singing most of the guides. And then I was also, running rehearsals and learning how to conduct it. So I was doing a lot of different stuff. Second year, Karina, who is also a VTuber, she's so sweet. Karina is someone who is classically trained. She's classically trained violist, I believe. And she asked like, hey, do you want help with like arranging the medley? And I was like, oh my God, yes, please. So second year, it was just me and her. And that made things so much easier, but it was still brutal. It's like, I think like a 50, 60 page score usually is about what it comes out to. And I think like first year, like it was a mess. You could tell it was not edited. Like we edited it as best as we could, Whereas last year, I think we had like 9 or 10 people that offered to help arrange. And this year, I think we only had 7. This year we have 10 about. And I'm so grateful for all of them and that we have like more people arranging because it's made things easier in the sense that like, even though it sounds like it's still like the same amount of time, now we can like polish things more, right? Like now we can have dedicated score editing time. We have more time for the guides. Like the first 2 years of off choir, we did not have the score done before rehearsals started. Like no one had a full score until like, I think a month or 2 before the convention because it was just like bam, bam, bam. But my goal is to have everything fully edited, have all the guides for people to get started on that first day of rehearsals, which is going to be in April.
Can people still sign up to do this for this year? And is there a theme already announced yet for it?
So we don't really have a theme. It was actually kind of a joke last year. Someone from staff was like, does the medley have a name? And all of us were just like,
whatever we want it to be.
I don't know. But we are still accepting people. You can still sign up for off choir. We haven't posted an invite link to the server yet just because right now we have a cap at 50 people just because staff is still working out getting another riser for us. So we don't want to like put that out until we like know for sure we get that other riser. But I feel pretty confident we're going to get the other riser and then we'll be able to hopefully get above 50. I'll be tweeting about it once that happens and OffKai itself will be tweeting about it. So definitely keep an eye on those. Once we get that go ahead, we're gonna start our recruitment and stuff like that, going super hard on that.
Awesome.
But it is open to anyone of any skill level. That was my goal too, is to have a environment where, anyone can join. We had some people that were like doing their PhD in music. We had some people where it was their first time looking at a score. So like any skill level is welcome. We're just here to, have fun and create something together. And it's also just really cool seeing how everyone's skill level has grown. I think like the coolest thing is last year was our 3rd year. And seeing like people that were there year 1, like helping out people that were new in year 3 was just like so cool to me. It made me so happy. But yeah, so I can't put out anything yet, but hopefully soon we'll be able to accept new singers and whatnot.
Awesome. Oh, that's so good to hear. I really appreciate your, like you telling us your story about like teaching and your process. Because it's just like, I think it is really important to hear about how like what teachers are going through and then like this world right now. Because I don't know if it's going to get any better, unfortunately.
Me neither. That's why I'm here. I think nothing radicalized me more than the American public education.
Oh my gosh. And like hopefully, because like I said, I don't think there were anime singing teachers 5-10 years ago. There are ways for teachers to branch out and like teach in new ways. Like I listen to Hank Green a lot. He teaches science. So like there's ways we can be smarter, I hope, in all forms of education. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Uploaded, and thank you to Evie for joining us today on this episode. If you liked our conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you would like to perform in choir.